Hi, so this is going to be your first podcast for AP Euro. I want to do these to supplement what we talk about in class. Um, it may be broken up into a couple different parts because I have a 15-minute limit here on how long I can record. So it's important to realize with the Atlantic economy that mercantilism is one of the major factors for this huge expansion of European trade across the Atlantic. So that's one of the first really important things to keep in mind. And along with that, we're starting to see how important not just trade is, but world trade, right? The idea that that goods are going to be imported and exported not just from European country to European country or even across Eurasia, but now we have this transoceanic, particularly transatlantic trade. One of the most important crops that is produced from the Atlantic trade is sugar, right? Most Europeans, particularly British, are very much attached to their sugar, and the West Indies, as well as other Caribbean colonies, are known for their sugar business. So we're going to see serious sugar exports coming from the Caribbean colonies. But in addition to that, we also have a growing tobacco industry, cotton industry. Cotton's going to become even more important once we get into the 19th century in the Americas. And also indigo, which is used as a dye. These are all also very important commodities. And on top of that, we start to see the proliferation of the slave trade. And this is particularly the case with the sugar industry because sugar was a very labor intensive crop. So as the sugar industry grew, so did the slave trade. Um, so realize that when the Atlantic slave trade starts to expand, the greatest benefactors, the countries that are making the most money off of the European slave trade are the Netherlands, France, and Great Britain. And Great Britain is in caps here because Great Britain benefits by far more than the other two countries here. We see this exemplified partly because England has the largest number of immigrants to the New World at this time. Even though France does have colonies, they are far smaller in terms of population, and we're going to see, or actually, as we already have seen, um, with the French and Indian War, the French territories in the New World are going to shrink significantly, and they've already shrunk after the War of Spanish Succession. They lost Nova Scotia, they lost the Hudson Bay territories, and they lost Newfoundland at that point. So the French influence is increasingly shrinking. Um, let's get a little bit of a recap on what mercantilism is, because this is one of the major reasons why the Atlantic economy is growing so much. All right, remember when we previously talked about it, especially with France and Cardinal Richelieu, that it is, well, first off, one thing that isn't written here, but it's important to realize that mercantilism is kind of the opposite of capitalism. And the reason why that is because mercantilism um, has the country very much involved in economic regulation, right? Countries are going to they are going to be doing whatever they can to maximize exports and minimize imports. So that means they're going to be regulating the economy pretty significantly. Whereas under capitalism, the government really is not supposed to be involved. That it's really supposed to be kind of this market that is shaped by independent and private investments. So it's important to realize that. But going back to some of the notes on here, one of the main goals of mercantilism is economic self-sufficiency, right? So in other words, countries don't want to have to rely on other countries in order to get products, right? And they also want to be able to export whatever they are producing as much as possible so that they have more gold than any other country. All right, and we're going to talk about bullionism and how that relates to gold and silver in particular. So, what are the ways to maximize maximize exports and minimize imports? Well, one of the big ones is to pass tariffs, right, which are taxes on imports. All right, this is basically going to discourage people from buying things from another country because they're more expensive. All right, so you're going to try to buy things that are produced within your country as much as possible because they are cheaper, right? In addition to that, I already said, minimize imports, maximize exports. And again, this is the way that that countries are going to establish a what they call a favorable balance of trade. Um, and one of the other principles that goes along with mercantilism is this thing called bullionism, which is where countries are seeking to build up these large gold reserves, or actually also silver reserves, and they want to prevent the flow of these precious metals to other countries. All right, and the reason why that is because another element of mercantilism was that countries believed that there was a limited amount of wealth in the world, right? So the idea was for them to amass as much of that wealth as possible. So the more gold you had, the more wealthy you were with respect to other countries. Um, Mercantilism also explains why colonies are becoming so important, which is another huge aspect of the Atlantic economy. Anything that your colony produces is going to be part of your economy, right? So, with the example of the British colonies in the Americas, something like tobacco that could be produced in Virginia, let's say, um, is going to profit the British, right? And then we're going to see in a little while with the Navigation Acts how that is even more something that preserves the economy of Britain. So you're not benefiting as an American per se, because everything you are doing is for the benefit of the English economy. Anything that is grown or produced in the Americas is sold as a British item, right? The other thing that you want to do is develop as many industries at home as possible, right? And we see a lot of this happening in England's economy. One of the key ideas to remember at the end of this section is that England is emerging on top economically. And we can think about why that is because of um, the agricultural revolution, which really starts in England and the Low Countries, as we talked about already, and also because of the cottage industry, right? Because it is in England that the economy is able to diversify, because they have enclosed so many farm. I mean, ultimately, we don't see small farmers anymore. We see these large, more productive farms that ultimately allow businesses, ultimately allow the economy in England to be more diverse. All right, so if you have the agricultural problem taken care of, you can start to develop more industry. All right, which is another reason why England kind of emerges on top here. We're going to continue with part two um, on another video, so I will pick back up with the other parts of the Atlantic economy. We're going to talk specifically about England next. Okay, so part two. Now, it's important to figure out why England becomes the leading maritime power in the 18th century, why all these other countries that had been competing in terms of colonial possessions and in terms of the mercantilist system, why England wins out over all of them. And one of the reasons why this is because England has a very strong bank, the Bank of England, which was founded in 1694. And why a bank would help with mercantilism? Well, basically, all these individual traders, investors, people who are investing in joint stock companies, are able to take out significant loans from the bank. So when the Bank of England is founded, we basically have a further incentive and a greater source of capital for economic development. Um, so that basically boost trade, that is. Also, we have the Act of Union, which is in 1707. And what this does is it creates Great Britain. So we don't just have England now, we have England and Scotland together. So ultimately, because of that, we see that the Scottish join with England because they want to have the same benefits of trade within the English Empire. So we basically have an entirely new country that's added to England and helps boost its mercantilist system and helps boost its overseas trade. The other thing is that the British mercantilist system is a little bit different from a country like France, for example. Under British mercantilism, there was a goal to benefit the private interests of individuals as well as the public needs of the state. So, as a contrasting example, France, their mercantilist system only served to benefit the states. There was no individual benefit through their mercantilist system. So, an example of why that is because France is still using the intendant system, right, which kind of serves to benefit the throne in particular, and and ultimately there's really no individual incentive to get involved in the mercantilist system in a country like France. Another reason why England's economy is flourishing in terms of trade is because of the Navigation Acts. And these actually start during the time of Oliver Cromwell. The first Navigation Act is passed in 1651, but they continue throughout the 1660s. So basically, what the Navigation Acts are doing is creating as much of an English monopoly on trade as possible. So, um, the way that they work is that any item that is imported from Europe into Great Britain has to be carried on British owned ships. And they also have to have British crews. So basically, what this means is that money stays in the British economy and it helps British traders specifically. Also, this affects colonial trade because if you are producing something in the American colonies, you have to use British ships and you have to pass through Great Britain. So basically, what this means is that the colonies are almost exclusively buying goods from Britain and selling their goods to Britain. Okay, so things like sugar, tobacco, cotton are going to be transported on British ships. All right, so that means that Great Britain is going to be benefiting far more from the colonial economy than any other country. Um, so kind of a silly little graphic, but you see some of the major items that are being traded between the colonies and England and how much that benefits England's economy, especially cotton and textiles. These are huge, and these are things that England is going to be able to trade almost exclusively. And all these other countries in Europe are not going to have connections to these trade networks. Okay, we have time for one more thing, and then we'll do another part. So realize that another reason why England is getting so powerful is because it is at the expense of the Dutch. All right, remember that the Dutch economy was most prominent in the first half of the 17th century. We refer to it as the Golden Age of the Netherlands. And there are a number of reasons why this is. One is that it is a middle class dominated society. And the middle class is also called burghers, and they dominate politics and the economy. All right, this is going to make their system benefit individuals in particular. It also means that their economy is a little bit more capitalistic. And the reason why this is because the government is decentralized and it's not really impeding on any trade or manufacturing that takes place in the Netherlands. Also, because of religious toleration, which we already talked about, many foreigners can live in the Netherlands without persecution. So this creates a very diverse economy in the Netherlands, and other countries aren't going to have that same sort of economic system. Okay, another reason why the Dutch are declining in favor of the British is because there's a series of wars called the Anglo-Dutch Wars. There are three of them between 1652 and 1674. And all of these are going to damage Dutch shipping and commerce. Right? Most notably, in 1664, this is when England seizes New Amsterdam and turns it into New York. Right? We're also going to see that as a result of the Anglo-Dutch Wars, the Dutch start to fall behind the English in shipping, trade, and colonies because they don't have New Amsterdam anymore. But eventually these wars are going to come to an end, and interestingly, the English and Dutch are going to become allies because they want to stop the expansion of Louis XIV in his wars. All right, this is just about the 15-minute mark, so we'll continue with a part 2.